6 elderly women cornered my 15-year-old daughter at a farmer's market, calling her unchristian for refusing to embrace her dead father's secret children. What I did next didn't just destroy their reputation, it obliterated their entire world, one perfectly crafted revelation at a time. If you live for those moments when manipulative people get exactly what they deserve, smash that subscribe button and prepare yourself for the most satisfying takedown you'll hear all year. Hit like if you believe in karmic justice, and stick around because this revenge story has more twists than a soap opera finale. Let me paint you a picture of my life 18 months ago. I'm Sarah, 46 years old, and I thought I had it all figured out. Beautiful home in a quiet neighborhood, 2 incredible daughters, Emma, 17, and Lily, 15, and a husband of nearly 20 years, who I believed was my soulmate. I was the primary breadwinner, working 60-hour weeks in corporate consulting while David managed his small accounting practice. We weren't wealthy, but we were comfortable, stable, happy, or so I thought. The first crack in my perfect life came on a Tuesday evening in March. I was in my home office, drowning in spreadsheets, when I heard Emma's voice from the kitchen. Not her usual teenage chatter, but something different, strained, angry. Then I heard Lily crying. I found them huddled together at the kitchen table, Emma's laptop open between them, her face white as paper. Lily's mascara was streaking down her cheeks, and she was clutching a tissue like a lifeline. "Mom," Emma said, her voice barely above a whisper, "you need to see this." What I saw on that screen shattered everything I thought I knew about my life. Text messages, dozens of them, between my husband and someone named Michelle. The messages went back 2 years, filled with intimate details, inside jokes, and declarations of love that made my stomach turn. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was the photos of 2 little boys, maybe 4 and 6 years old, with David's unmistakable green eyes and crooked smile. "Daddy's taking the boys to the park," one message read. "Can't wait until we can be a real family." I remember the exact moment my world collapsed. It felt like someone had reached into my chest and ripped out my heart with their bare hands. My knees buckled, and I had to grab the counter to keep from falling. Emma was instantly at my side, her arm around my waist. This 17-year-old girl, suddenly having to be strong for her broken mother. "How long have you known?" I managed to whisper. "I found his phone yesterday," Emma said. "He left it charging in the living room, and it kept buzzing. I thought maybe it was work, but..." She gestured helplessly at the screen. That night, while David slept peacefully beside me, the same man who had kissed me goodbye that morning and told me he loved me, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, my mind racing. 20 years of marriage, 20 years of shared dreams, inside jokes, quiet Sunday mornings, and birthday celebrations. Had any of it been real? The confrontation came 3 days later. I had gathered evidence, screenshots, bank records showing money transferred to accounts I'd never seen. When I laid it all out on our dining room table, David's face went through a series of expressions: surprise, panic, resignation, and finally, something that looked almost like relief. "Sarah, I can explain," he started, but I held up my hand. "Don't," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "Don't insult my intelligence by pretending this is something that can be explained away. To children, David, you have 2 children with another woman." He broke down then, sobbing like a child himself. He told me about Michelle, how they'd met at a business conference, how one thing led to another. He said he loved us both, that he never meant for it to happen, that he was planning to tell me eventually. "Eventually," I repeated. "When, David? When the boys graduated high school? When they got married? When exactly was the right time to tell me that my entire life was a lie?" I filed for divorce the next week. The girls were devastated but supportive. They started therapy to process the betrayal, and I began the painful process of untangling 20 years of shared life. David moved out, though he still saw the girls regularly. They were cold to him, but they were his daughters, and I wasn't going to poison that relationship any further than his own actions already had. Then came the phone call that changed everything. It was a Tuesday evening in October, almost exactly 7 months after Discovery Day. I was helping Lily with her chemistry homework when my phone rang. Unknown number. "Mrs. Peterson." The voice was professional, clinical. "This is Officer Martinez with the State Highway Patrol. I'm calling about your husband, David Peterson." The rest of the conversation was a blur. Head-on collision. Rainy night. He'd been driving back from visiting Michelle and the boys. She had been in the car with him. Neither of them survived. I felt nothing. Not sadness, not relief, not anger, just this strange, hollow emptiness. The man I'd loved was already gone, had been gone for months. This was just making it official. But David's parents, Harold and Margaret, both in their late 70s, saw things very differently. To them, I was the evil woman who had driven their son away with my unreasonable demands and failure to forgive. They conveniently ignored the fact that I'd been supporting their son financially for years, that I'd been the one holding our family together while he built his secret second life. The funeral was a nightmare. They insisted on a church service at their congregation, where I had to sit in the front row and listen to the pastor talk about David's dedication to family and his loving heart. I watched Michelle's family across the aisle, 2 little boys who looked just like my daughter's father, and felt like I was living in some alternate reality. After the service, Margaret cornered me in the church lobby. "This is all your fault," she hissed, her voice low but venomous. "If you hadn't been so stubborn, so unforgiving, David would still be alive." "Excuse me." I stared at her, unable to believe what I was hearing. "A good Christian wife stands by her husband," she continued. "She doesn't run to lawyers and destroy her family over a simple mistake." "A simple mistake," I repeated. "Margaret, he had 2 children with another woman, for years. That's between him and God," she snapped. "Your job was to forgive and work on your marriage, not tear it apart." That's when I realized I wasn't just dealing with grief and manipulation. I was dealing with people who genuinely believed that I was the villain in this story. The custody battle started 2 weeks later. Harold and Margaret filed papers claiming that I was an unfit mother, that the girls needed stable grandparents to guide them through their grief. They wanted Emma and Lily to live with them in their cramped 2-bedroom house, where they could be properly raised in the faith. My lawyer laughed when she read their petition. "They don't have a legal leg to stand on," she assured me. "You're a fit parent. You've been the primary breadwinner, and the girls are old enough to express their own preferences. But the legal system is slow." And in the meantime, Harold and Margaret began their campaign of harassment. They showed up at my house, uninvited, demanding to see their granddaughters. They called the school, trying to get information about the girls' schedules and activities. They even contacted Child Services, claiming that I was neglecting Emma and Lily's emotional needs. The breaking point came on a Saturday morning in early November. It was Lily's 16th birthday, and I had planned something special. Our town has this wonderful farmers market every weekend, local vendors selling fresh produce, homemade bread, artisanal chocolates, and crafts. It's one of those places that makes you feel connected to your community, where people know each other and look out for one another. I gave Lily $100 and told her to go wild. "It's your birthday," I said. "Buy whatever makes you happy, especially chocolate." She lit up like a Christmas tree. For the first time in months, she looked like a normal teenager instead of a girl carrying the weight of the world. She hugged me tight and disappeared into the crowd of vendors, her phone in one hand and her birthday money in the other. Emma and I browsed the vegetable stalls, picking out ingredients for dinner. We were debating between butternut squash and acorn squash when I realized we'd been there for over an hour, and I hadn't seen Lily since she'd run off toward the bakery section. "Where's your sister?" I asked Emma. She looked around, frowning. I thought she was by the chocolate stand. That's when the maternal radar kicked in. You know that feeling when something is just wrong, even though you can't put your finger on it. My stomach clenched, and I pulled out my phone to call Lily. It rang twice before she answered, and I could immediately tell she was crying. "Mom," her voice was small, scared. "Mom, I need you to come get me. There are these women, and they won't leave me alone." "Where are you, baby?" "By the honey stand, near the back." "Mom, I'm scared. They're saying horrible things." I grabbed Emma's hand, and we ran through the market, dodging families with strollers and couples sharing coffee. I found Lily exactly where she said she'd be, standing with her back against the honey vendor's table, looking smaller than her 5'6" frame should allow. Surrounding her were 6 women, all probably in their 60s or 70s, all wearing that particular expression of righteous indignation that I'd come to recognize from my years attending church with David's family. They had formed a semicircle around my daughter, trapping her against the table, their voices a chorus of condemnation. "You're being selfish," one of them was saying. "Your poor grandparents are grieving, and you won't even visit them." Those little boys lost their father, too, another added. You should be ashamed of yourself, not wanting to be a big sister to them. It's not Christian, said a third. Family is family, no matter what. I pushed through their circle like a linebacker breaking through a defensive line. Get away from my daughter, I said, my voice low and dangerous. Now. The women stepped back, but only slightly. I could see they recognized me. Some of them had been at the funeral, had probably heard Margaret's version of events. Emma, I said, not taking my eyes off the women, take your sister and go pay for whatever she picked out. Then go to the car and wait for me. But Mom, go. Now. Emma grabbed Lily's hand and they disappeared into the crowd. I turned back to face the 6 women, my hands shaking with rage. How dare you? I said. How dare you ambush my child? We're just trying to help, said the apparent leader, a woman with silver hair and a pearl necklace. Those girls need guidance. They need to be left alone to grieve, I shot back. They're teenagers who just lost their father. They lost their father because of you, said another woman, her voice dripping with accusation. If you hadn't been so stubborn, so unforgiving, he'd still be alive. The market seemed to fade around us. I could feel other people stopping to watch, could sense the tension building like electricity in the air. You have no idea what you're talking about, I said. We know you drove your husband away, Pearl Necklace said. We know you refused to work on your marriage. We know you're keeping those girls from their family out of spite. A good Christian wife stands by her husband, added another. She doesn't run to lawyers and destroy her family over a simple mistake. There was that phrase again. Simple mistake, as if 20 years of deception, as if 2 secret children, as if an entire second family was just a minor slip-up. You know what? I said, my voice rising. You're right. I should have been a better Christian wife. I should have been more forgiving. I should have embraced my husband's affair and welcomed his illegitimate children into our home with open arms. The sarcasm was thick enough to cut with a knife, but these women were too self-righteous to recognize it. Exactly, said one of them, nodding approvingly. That's what a true Christian would do. I should have packed up my daughters and moved them into a house with the woman their father was cheating with, I continued. I should have explained to them that Daddy's new family was just as important as they were. I should have taught them that women should always submit to men, no matter how those men treat them. Now you're getting it, said Pearl Necklace, completely missing the point. And when my daughters grow up and their husbands cheat on them, I should tell them to just forgive and forget, right? Because that's what good Christian women do. By now, we had attracted quite a crowd. Other market-goers had stopped to watch, some openly staring, others pretending to examine produce while listening to every word. You're twisting everything, said one of the women. We're just trying to help those poor grandparents see their granddaughters. Those poor grandparents are trying to take my children away from me, I said. They're suing me for custody, they're harassing my family, and now they've sent you to harass my daughter on her birthday. We came on our own, Pearl Necklace protested. We saw that poor girl wandering around, spending money on frivolous things when she should be thinking about her family obligations. Her family obligations, I repeated. She's 16 years old. Her family obligation is to go to school, do her homework, and be a kid, not to parent the children from her father's affair. Those children are her brothers, said another woman. She has a Christian duty to love them. That's when I lost it completely. Where were you when my daughters discovered their father's affair? I shouted. Where was your Christian duty then? Where were you when they were crying themselves to sleep, wondering if their entire childhood was a lie? Where was your concern for their emotional well-being when they were in therapy, trying to process their father's betrayal? The women looked uncomfortable, but didn't back down. You could have worked it out, one of them said. You could have found a way to make it work. Make it work. I laughed, a harsh sound that had no humor in it. You want to know what making it work looks like? It looks like pretending that 20 years of deception never happened. It looks like lying to my daughters about who their father really was. It looks like teaching them that women should accept whatever men dish out, no matter how degrading or hurtful. That's not what we're saying, Pearl Necklace protested, but her voice lacked conviction. That's exactly what you're saying, I shot back. You're saying that my daughters should forget their father's betrayal and embrace the living proof of it. You're saying that I should have stayed married to a man who was building a second family behind my back. You're saying that Christian women should be doormats. The crowd around us was growing larger, and I could hear murmurs of agreement from some of the other market-goers. Not everyone was buying the women's version of Christian duty. You're making a scene, said one of the women, looking around nervously. I'm making a scene, I said incredulously. You cornered my teenage daughter on her birthday, lectured her about her Christian duty to love the children from her father's affair, and I'm making a scene. We were just trying to help, Pearl, Nicholas said weakly. Help, I said. You want to help. Leave my family alone. Stop harassing my daughters. Stop spreading lies about me. Stop trying to guilt teenagers into relationships they're not ready for. Those boys need their sisters, said another woman, making one last attempt. Those boys need therapy and stability, I said, not to be forced into a relationship with girls who are still processing their own trauma. My daughters will decide, for themselves, when they're ready, if they want any relationship with their half-brothers. That's not your decision to make. The argument was getting louder and more heated. Other vendors were starting to look concerned, and I could see market security heading our way. I think it's time for everyone to move along, said a security guard, a young man who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. We're just having a discussion, said Pearl Necklace. A discussion that's disturbing other customers. The guard replied firmly. I'm going to have to ask you all to leave. The women looked outraged, but they began to disperse. As they walked away, I could hear them muttering among themselves about ungrateful daughters and poor grandparents. I made my way through the market, my hands still shaking with adrenaline and rage. I found Emma and Lily sitting in the car, both looking shell-shocked. Are you okay? I asked Lily, sliding into the driver's seat. She nodded, but I could see she'd been crying. They said, it was my fault Dad died, she whispered. They said if I hadn't told you about the affair, you wouldn't have divorced him, and he'd still be alive. My heart broke all over again. Lily, look at me, I said, turning to face her. Your father's death was an accident. A terrible, tragic accident. It had nothing to do with you. Nothing to do with the divorce. Nothing to do with anything except bad weather and bad timing. But if I hadn't found his phone, then I would have found out some other way, I interrupted. Baby, your father made his choices. He chose to have an affair. He chose to lie to us for years. He chose to build a secret family. You didn't make those choices. You just discovered them. Emma reached over and took her sister's hand. Those women are crazy, she said. They don't know what they're talking about. We drove home in silence, but I could feel the anger building inside me like a pressure cooker. This had gone too far. It was one thing for Harold and Margaret to harass me, but involving my daughters, sending church members to ambush them in public, blaming them for their father's death, that was unforgivable. That night, after the girls went to bed, I called someone I trusted, Mark, a member of Harold and Margaret's church, who had always been reasonable and kind. He had been David's friend since childhood, and I'd known him for nearly 20 years. Sarah, he said, sounding surprised. How are you holding up? I've been better, I said. Mark, I need to tell you about something that happened today. I recounted the entire farmer's market incident, and I could hear Mark's sharp intake of breath when I got to the part about the women blaming Lily for her father's death. Jesus, Sarah, he said, I'm so sorry. That's completely out of line. It gets worse, I said. I have a feeling this didn't happen in a vacuum. These women didn't just randomly decide to harass my daughter. Someone put them up to it. Mark was quiet for a long moment. Sarah, there's something you need to know. Margaret has been active on social media lately. She's been posting in our church Facebook group. What kind of posts? Long, detailed posts about how you're keeping the girls from them, how you're leaving them homeless and penniless, how the girls won't even speak to them. She's painted you as this vindictive woman who's destroying their family out of spite. I felt my blood pressure rising. What exactly did she say? She claimed that you're forcing the girls to choose between you and their grandparents. She said you're refusing to let them see their little brothers. She made it sound like you're being cruel and unreasonable. Did she mention the affair? Mark hesitated. That's the thing, Sarah. She didn't. She found a way to tell the story without mentioning why you divorced David. How is that possible? She told everyone that Michelle was your surrogate, that you couldn't have more children, so you and David arranged for Michelle to carry his babies. Then she claimed that when the boys were born, you didn't want them because they were male, and you only wanted daughters. I was speechless. The audacity, the sheer creativity of the lie, was breathtaking. She said that's why you divorced David, Mark continued, because he wanted to keep the boys, and you didn't. She made it sound like you were jealous of the children and rejected them out of spite. And people believed this. Sarah, you have to understand, our church is very conservative. The idea of a woman rejecting children, especially male children, fits into some people's preconceived notions about feminism and modern women. And Margaret has been a member of this church for 50 years. She's respected, trusted, so they're rallying around her. Unfortunately, yes, she's been getting money, food, offers of help. People are genuinely outraged on her behalf. Outraged enough to send 6 women to harass my daughter. I don't think Margaret specifically organized that, Mark said. But she created the environment where people felt justified in taking action. She's been talking about how the girls need intervention and guidance to see their Christian duty. After I hung up with Mark, I sat in my dark living room, staring at the ceiling and thinking. Margaret had outmaneuvered me. She had crafted a narrative that made me the villain and her the victim, and she had done it without technically lying, just by omitting the most important part of the story. But she had made one crucial mistake. She had involved my daughters. She had sent people to harass them, to blame them for their father's death, to guilt them into relationships they weren't ready for, and that was unforgivable. I thought about the evidence I had gathered during the divorce proceedings, photos, text messages, emails, bank records. I had kept everything, stored securely in multiple locations. I had been planning to use it in court, if necessary. But now I realized it had a different purpose. The next morning, I called in sick to work and drove to the copy center across town. I spent 3 hours and $200 printing everything, every photo of David and Michelle together, every text message between them, every email where they talked about their future together, their plans to be a real family, every bank statement showing money transferred to accounts in Michelle's name. But the most damaging evidence was the correspondence between David and his parents. Because Harold and Margaret had known about the affair from the beginning, they had known about Michelle, about the boys, about everything. And they had not only supported David's deception, they had actively encouraged it. "Don't tell Sarah yet," Margaret had written in one email. "Wait until the boys are older. It will be easier to explain then." "Your mother is right," Harold had added. "Sarah is a good provider. Let her keep supporting the family while you figure out what you want to do." And the most damning of all, the emails they had sent to my daughters after David's death. Messages, calling them ungrateful bastards, and blaming them for their father's death. Messages that were sent 2 days after the funeral, when the girls were still in shock and grief. I had the copy center print everything on high-quality paper, then spent the rest of the day at home, carefully crafting presentation folders. I used the same color scheme and design as the church songbooks, even copying the font from their website. To a casual observer, they would look exactly like the hymnals the church distributed every Sunday. The first page of each folder featured a large, clear photo of David and Michelle kissing in what was unmistakably our living room. Their faces were clearly visible, and Michelle looked nothing like me. Different hair color, different skin tone, different build. Under the photo, I wrote their names and called it their love story. The rest of the folder contained chronological evidence of the affair, the deception, and Harold and Margaret's complicity. I included bank records showing David's financial support of his secret family, text messages between him and Michelle about their plans for the future, and most importantly, the emails between David and his parents, showing their full knowledge and support of the affair. I saved the best for last, the messages Harold and Margaret had sent to my daughters, calling them names and blaming them for their father's death. I printed those in a larger font, with a note explaining that these were sent to teenagers who had just lost their father. Sunday morning, I woke up early and drove to the church. I arrived an hour before service, when the building was open but mostly empty. I went to the back of the sanctuary, where they kept extra songbooks and programs for visitors who forgot to bring their own. I carefully placed my folders among the regular songbooks, making sure they were distributed throughout the stack. To anyone grabbing a hymnal, they would look completely normal until they opened them. Then I left and went home to make breakfast for my daughters, who had no idea what was about to happen. The first text came during lunch. It was from Mark. "Sarah, what did you do?" Then the phone started ringing. My landline, my cell phone, even Emma's phone. I turned them all off and told the girls we were having a technology-free afternoon. By evening, I couldn't resist checking my phone. I had 47 missed calls and over 100 text messages. The church's Facebook group had exploded. Margaret's original sob story post had been flooded with comments, but they weren't the supportive messages she had been receiving for weeks. How could you lie to us like this? One person had written. Those poor girls, wrote another. How could you blame children for their father's death? I can't believe we sent money to support this deception, added a third. But the harshest comments were reserved for David and Michelle. The names they were called were so harsh that the church moderators had to step in and delete the worst of them. This was a conservative congregation that took adultery very seriously, and they were not forgiving. A wolf in sheep's clothing, wrote one longtime member about David. Jezebel, wrote another about Michelle, using a term I couldn't repeat. In polite company. Mark sent me a private message. The pastor had to address the congregation tonight. People are furious. Margaret and Harold left halfway through the service. I don't think they'll be back. Over the next few days, the fallout continued. I received 2 formal apologies from women who had been at the farmers' market, both expressing horror at their behavior and asking for forgiveness. The pastor sent a letter inviting me to join the church for spiritual support during this difficult time, which I politely declined. But the most satisfying part was watching Margaret's social media meltdown. She posted a long, rambling message about feeling alienated and abandoned by people she had trusted for decades. She complained that no one cares about the elderly anymore, and that people were quick to judge without understanding. She ended with a wistful comment about how, if her wonderful son were still alive, he would take care of her and her husband in their old age. I almost laughed out loud at that one. David had been financially dependent on me for years. The only reason Harold and Margaret had any money at all was because David had left them his life insurance policy and personal savings account. 3 weeks later, I received a call from my lawyer. Harold and Margaret had dropped their custody suit. Their lawyer had advised them that their case was no longer viable, especially given the evidence of the harassment of my daughters. They're also facing some social consequences, my lawyer added. Apparently, they've been ostracized from their church community. Their lawyer mentioned that they're considering moving to another state to live with relatives. I felt a twinge of something, not quite sympathy, but recognition that they were elderly people who had lost their son and were now facing the consequences of their own actions. But then I remembered Lily's tears at the farmer's market, the way she had whispered that the women said it was her fault her father died, and any sympathy I might have felt evaporated. As I write this, 6 months later, life has settled into a new normal. The girls are doing well in therapy. Emma is a senior in high school, already accepted to her first choice college. Lily is thriving as a junior, involved in drama club and debate team. They've both expressed curiosity about their half-brothers, and we've discussed the possibility of arranging a meeting when they feel ready. Harold and Margaret did move away to live with Margaret's sister in another state. They sold their house and left town quietly, without saying goodbye to anyone. I heard through Mark that they're having a hard time adjusting to their new church community, where no one knows their history or accepts their version of events. Sometimes, I wonder if I went too far, if exposing their lies so publicly was the right thing to do. But then I remember the look on Lily's face when she thought she was responsible for her father's death, and I know I'd do it again in a heartbeat. The truth has a way of setting things right, even when it takes time to surface. Margaret thought she could rewrite history, paint herself as the victim and me as the villain. She thought she could use her church community as a weapon against my family. She thought she could manipulate grieving teenagers into relationships they weren't ready for. She was wrong on all counts. Sometimes the best revenge isn't about getting even. Sometimes it's about letting people see who someone really is, without the carefully constructed facade they've built around themselves. Margaret spent 50 years building a reputation as a godly, caring woman. It took one morning to tear it all down, simply by showing people the truth. What's the most satisfying moment of justice you've ever witnessed? Drop it in the comments below. I promise I read every single one. If this story hit you in the feels, smash that like button and subscribe for more tales of karma coming full circle. And remember, the truth always comes out eventually. It just sometimes needs a little help getting there. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you in the next one.